Okay, so the book that I was reading for the semester is Directing Video Games 101 Tips for Creative Directors, written by Brian Algier. So, some of the fundamentals that he goes over, because this is all a tips book, that I think are super duper important is that the director's role is to hold the vision of the game and the project, to provide structure for the project, and to make sure that they're leading effectively. Because without an effective leader and director, project's kind of shot. And so, pillars. This is one that I think is really super duper important. I talk about it all the time when I'm mentoring and teaching new teams. So, game pillars are essentially the 3 to 4 things that really just hold your game up. They're the core fundamental pieces of your game. They're generally 1 to 3 words in length, and they're just the drivers for your game. These are kind of the things that the director is going to hold as the vision, and they're going to be what the director uses to talk about for the vision. Keywords. And then the magic beans. So these are the statements that kind of incorporate those pillars and sum up your elevator statement. It's what your elevator statement is going to be based upon. Do to know. So you really, in game development, have to kind of dig your hands in deep. You need some experience to really be able to build your creative toolbox, to really understand what's going on, and to really dig deep. And so for building your creative toolbox, we'll talk a little bit about more of that later, but a lot of it comes from experience. Playing games for work, so this is a really, really huge one that I've had to learn over the years too. Whether it's playing a game or watching playthroughs on YouTube, you have to look at games. If you're making games, you really, really have to know what you're doing and what you're making and understand the mechanics behind it. What is fun? What has been done? What hasn't been done? What is good? What is unique? What's that 80-20 balance that exists out there that doesn't exist? Dive in deep. So take the time sometime and really play a game straight through. Look at the title, look at the UI, look at the music and the visuals and the UI and the UX and all of it. Just really dig deep. Look at the narrative, the mechanics, how they get from point A to point B, the objective system, the combat system. Pay attention to all the little things. And do your homework. Every game is going to have some small thing that's going to allow you to do research and dig in. Do it. Take the time, spend the time. Whether it's a game about Congolese child soldiers, since you have to dig into that conflict, the mineral war conflict's happening, and what are these minerals, and what is this conflict, and what's going on in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or it's an educational game, and you have to understand economic systems and the housing crisis. It doesn't really matter. You're going to have to do the deep digging at some point and understand, and knowledge gained is never a loss, so don't be scared to do your homework on video games. This is one of my favorites right here. Be inspired by the unusual. There's great stuff in the world all around you every day that you can be inspired by and use as video game inspiration. So, when I first started working with my boyfriend, he was working on a game called Call Center Simulator. It's a game about his time at GoDaddy. Unfortunately, the video doesn't seem to look right now. And it was a game about working in an office like GoDaddy and being able to take your frustrations out on this virtual office. It was a virtual reality game, and so you could just get in there and destroy it all. It was a office space simulator per se, red stapler included. You had your little gun so you could shoot things up and really have a good time. And so crazy inspiration place, an old office job come to life. And then you have an ant keeper job. So that's crazy. I've been watching this YouTube channel for a while, and it's Ants Canada's the YouTube channel. Mikey is the guy that runs it, and he is super duper into ants. These are all his ant colonies here, and so a crazy idea would be to make a game as the ant keeper, to be to be Mikey and to be the guy that makes and runs all of these terrarium ant colonies. And to have to design them and to have to do the work. And so, like, that's an insane thing, but it's a crazy game idea coming out of an unusual, crazy nature guy on YouTube. And so think about stuff like that. Pay attention to the world around you. Look at what you're doing in everyday life. Dig deeper and come up with some crazy ideas. So structural elements. As a leader, you're going to have to make sure you're upholding that structure. And so these are some elements you're going to want to look at. The MacGuffin technique is really cool. It's been used in movies, television for years. Alfred Hitchcock is actually the one that came up with it. But basically, it's just something that moves the plot forward. Everybody uses it in a slightly different way. You can kind of see an example on the screen here. It's cool. Find the fun early. This is huge. If you don't know what's fun about your game, neither of the players. Doesn't matter when this happens in the cycle, as far as like you figuring out when the fun is. Because if you don't know at any point ever, they're never going to know. You need to know early. You need to know now. If you don't figure it out first thing, you know, you're never really going to be able to express to players what it is. So figure out what that loop is, answer some of these questions, nail it down early. Grab your players early. So grab their attention, be the God of War guy, and come in and grab them by the shirt and grab them now. You've got about 1 hour to make sure that those players become loyal to you before they're out. So that means you need to make sure your user experience is completely seamless. Players can't just jump into your game and not know how to play it and not know what they're doing. They're going to jump out and they're not going to come back. So some key elements you really want to consider when you're making your game and you're looking at the early experience for players is what does your opening title and logo look like? You want to make sure you're giving players what the essence of the game is really, really quickly, right up front. In the old Blockbuster days, right, you'd have your demos, and those would have maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes of gameplay on them. So developers would have to get the message of the game and the core essence of the game out right quick, right from the start. Think about it like that. What do you want to convey to those players? Get it out quick. Let them take control of the game. Let them get their hands in there. Let them get dirty. Create some aspect to mystery. Keep them wanting them coming back. And then surprise them. Again, keep them wanting coming back for more. Flow zone. So this is roughly how does your game work? What's the pace like? Are players going to get too frustrated? Are they going to get bored? You want to make sure that there is a nice balance there. Make sure you're changing up the pace and it's not too repetitive. Emotional journey. So this is big. You want to make sure you're taking players on a balanced emotional journey. They get too stressed, they get too frustrated, you piss them off too much. Give them something that rewards them. Give them a happy thing. Give them an upgrade. Give them a reward of some sort. Don't let them get too mad because they'll run away from your game. Make sure that, again, like the flow zone, your emotional journey is super important, and you really want to make sure you plot out those moments in advance so you don't get too all over the place and you know exactly where it is that players are going to get happy and sad and upset, and you're able to make sure you design around that. And with that, create your macro design. So this is like an overall layout and flow chart of your player experience from start to finish. So this is going to help you really keep on track, understand what's important, understand what you need to work on next, and really gauge what the player is going to experience from start to finish. Building your creative toolbox. These are a bunch of really important key aspects that you want to consider when you're looking at building your toolbox. So, the power of music and visuals. Really important here. So, if I play this video, and jump in a little bit, this is Mario Kart 64. It sounds really weird because there's no music. Mario 64, or Mario Kart 64 without music just sounds like a boring racing kart game. Now, Mario Kart 64 with music sounds kind of awesome. So it's a totally different experience. It's not just a racing kart game. There's a feel, there's personality. It sounds like Mario Kart. And if we come back and hear this again, crazy different. Even have sound effects in. So there's noise, but it's not there. Two totally different experiences, so that really demonstrates how powerful that music can really be. So definitely focus on that and make sure you've got something powerful in there. As far as visuals are concerned, these are some examples of post-processing, with the one in the middle being in Unreal and the two on the side in Communication Meltdown. Those are in Unity. So both engines are extremely powerful and have really great capability when it comes to post-processing and handling those visual aspects. And this is huge. Post-processing can clearly change the look of your game from these examples here. Creating ambiance. So this kind of goes back again to the last slide a little bit. You really want to make sure the world that you're in is immersive and that players can understand and feel it. So I really love this picture here over on the side of all of the different emotions and the different scenes that express those emotions in different ways. And that goes again back to expressing the emotional journey and plotting out those key emotional moments. You can utilize visual effects in very interesting ways to really allow that emotional journey to progress and change along the way. So make sure you're taking a look at the power of visuals and music and using them to create ambiance like you see on the screen here. And there's some post-processing effects down at the bottom you can take a look at that are really great tools when you come to creating ambiance and doing effects like you see. So environmental storytelling, this goes along with the creating ambiance a little bit. You can see the light shafts, some volumetric lighting here in this static image on the bottom. And the set design is amazing in this issue. You can see that there's turned over desks and a bookshelf there. There's papers on the floor. What I really love, if we go back, is there's all this stuff hanging out of the ceiling on the top. And so it looks really disheveled and abandoned. The floor tiles are all dirty. There's all sorts of gunk on the ceiling. There's vines growing over by the window. Glass is broken out. This environment tells us a story. It explains something to us, and we understand what kind of world this game is, and what kind of world we're living in here. So let that happen. Let the game tell the story for you. Here we've got Flaming Tires. This is a racing game. And what's really interesting about this game is all of the environmental detail that you see here. There's teddy bears all over the room. There's blocks. There's pictures on the wall. There's that lamp that you see there. Once we get to it, once we go into the bed, keep an eye out because there's little stickers under the bed. You see that graffiti that's written on the dressers there. Look at all those stickers under the bed. You can see as you come up here, you've got a bunch of blocks all over the place. The set design in this room is amazing. It tells the story of a little boy who comes home after school and wants to play with his race car. He's built a track throughout his room. He's really, really super into these race cars that he's got. Might say like they're Hot Wheels or something. And so he sets up this track. He wants his teddy bear to be able to see his race car. And so, yeah, it's just a really cool story. The little details tell the stories even more than like the big stuff. So making choices meaningful. This is super important. I'm going to let the slide speak for itself for the most part here. But the main choice here is that you want to make sure you're keeping the environment immersive enough and letting the players make their own choices. So going back to the player's perspective a little bit, you're really close to your game. And so you don't always know what the players are thinking on the other side or what the players are going to think on the other side. You can see here that your major strength is being able to see through the eyes of your player. You need to know what the player experience is going to be. We've talked about having that macro outline that allows you to really map out that player experience from start to finish. And that's hugely, hugely important. So let's move on to some leadership tips. These were some really important ones I wanted to point out. There were a bunch of leadership tips I wanted to go over, but I didn't want to, do too much. So guiding with goals is really awesome, especially if you're working agile, like we pretty much do agile scrum. It lets you kind of tell your team, look, our goal for this sprint is X. We want to achieve this. Whatever. We want to make sure the player feels X, Y, and Z. So that's really helpful. Gives everybody a thing to achieve and somewhere to go. It's a direct vision. Listen to your inner voice. Your gut is your guide. Always maintain that. If it doesn't feel right, cut it. The yes and approach. This is an improv comedy method that actually works really well in game development. You can see here how it works. And then it's different than the no but, or the yes but, or the but and method that a lot of people want to use. So just make sure you know the difference between the two, because yes and is adding on. And if you're using the word but anywhere, you're detracting, you're subtracting from the equation. Even if it seems like you're adding something on, but he is also... but the character is also doing something, that's still a subtraction. So make sure you're not using but, you're using and. Lead by example. This is huge, and we'll go over it again later, and we'll keep going over it, and it's something to keep in mind. What you do trickles down to your team. If you come in sad and mopey one day, the whole team is going to feel it, and it's going to drag everyone down. If you're late all the time, the team's going to come in late. No one's going to be there on time. Set the example for your team, because they will mimic your behavior. And you are the team's biggest promoter. You have to be able to promote your team because you are the face of your team. As the director, you not only hold the vision and the structure for the team, but you are the one that speaks on behalf of them. It's no longer an I, but it's a we, and you represent everything that the team and the game is. And so you have to go out there and you have to be their biggest advocate. And so keep that in mind, that you represent them and you fight for your team and for the well-being of the game every chance you get. So backbone to leadership, these are some more tips. I wanted to go a little bit more in depth with a few of them. Lead by example, just went over that. Be a coach, this is like a promoter, but it's a little bit different. This is your job, right? As a director, you're there to be mom and dad. You're there to be the person that's like, come on team, let's go, we've got this. You're there to be the drill sergeant that's there to be like, guys, let's go, we gotta get done to work, we gotta get this done, it's go time. You're there to do it all. Check your ego at the door. Again, it's not all about you, it's about we. Me, I, not coming out of your mouth anymore. It's we, it's us, it's our, it's them, it's the team, it's our team. It's not my team, it's our team, the team. And it's about them. And it's about what's best for them, not what's best for you. Listen to the black sheep in the corner. So these guys often have ideas that you haven't seen before, and they offer a new perspective that can be really useful. So don't count them out. You can never make everyone happy. This is true in life just as much as in video games. Keep it in mind. It's always going to happen. Somebody's going to be angry. As a director, one of your big jobs is being a peacekeeper. People fight. When you're building new teams, there's a bunch of stages to forming teams. And so there's always going to be that storming phase, which is one of the early phases of team development, where teams are fighting and there's some friction going on. And so you just need to make sure everyone's able to get through that smoothly without too many issues. Confide in your team. This is one of the ones I've had to suck up my pride a lot and really work on this one. but it's hugely powerful. Owning your mistakes and asking your team what you can do better for them really builds trust. And it really makes the team kind of take a step back and be like, oh, wow, okay, my leader really cares about me, really gives a shit. So do that. Have that open line of communication. Ask your team at the end of every milestone, or whatever, ask them like, hey, what can I do better? How can I improve? If you did something wrong, own up to it. Know when to let go. So this kind of goes back a little bit to it's not all about you. Anytime you're brainstorming, you want to let the ideas flow naturally. You don't want to necessarily be offering up ideas that are your own. You kind of just want to be guiding the process of idea generation, and kind of making sure everybody's staying on track and maintaining the vision there. It's not for you to come up with the ideas or you to suggest what's right or wrong. Just kind of go with what everyone seems to have as the right idea. Allow team members to take some agency of their ideas and their work. So I've got an amazing, amazing artist who he's so good and he's so creative. And all I've got to do is give him some constraints and let him know that, this is what the style I'm looking for is, and these are some reference images for what I want, and this is the general environment, and a few little details to get him started. And he'll come back, a week, 2 weeks later and give me this fantastic thing that, I'd never even expect to get. And that's just the kind of stuff that you want to make sure you're promoting within your team. Not all people are going to be able to do that, but the more you encourage that, the more you allow team members to kind of take responsibility for their own thing and you let them have something that they can call their own, the better off you're going to be. State the problem and not the solution. This is super duper important. So if you just state what the solution is, and you're like, all right, we need a bridge. Well, that's very literal. And somebody's just going to make a bridge, right? If you say, well, we need a way to get from point A to point B. Well, now you open it up for somebody to go and figure it out, right? Like we said, we want to be able to have your team have that agency. And so let them figure it out, right? These guys are good. You have them on your team for a reason. Let them do the work, right? It's not your job to tell them what to do as far as design is necessarily concerned. It's their job to figure it out, and you're just there to direct them and make sure they're staying on the right track. Directing with emotions, we talked a little bit about the emotional journey earlier, and I said I really liked that idea. And directing with emotion kind of comes back to this. So when we're talking, we want to talk and say, look, I want it to feel like this. When you look at that wall, I want the players to feel scared or intimidated, right? When they fight this monster, they should be terrified. When they receive this thing, they should be so happy. This new weapon, dude, they should be stoked about it. Stick to that emotional journey that you've plotted out, and make sure that you've got, the right emotions at the right point, and you're not sticking too much in any different place. And when you are directing with emotions, make sure you're sticking just to the emotions and you're staying away from the technical terms. So you don't necessarily want to say, well, I want some blue mood lighting so that it feels, dark and angsty. You want to say, well, I want it to feel dark and angsty, right? Let them come up with the blue lighting. Take it slow and sleep on it. So production takes time. It really does. And you really can't rush it, because if you rush it, everybody just kind of gets pissy at you, and then it doesn't go fast, and it takes longer, and it's just not worth it. And you have to really break it down. So if you look at development, you look at a game, and you look at your project as one giant big thing, and you look at all the big pieces, and you look at all your pillars, and they're all these giant big pieces, it can get super overwhelming. Break it down, make it smaller. Look at all the smaller tasks. If you've got multiplayer, well, look at the networking and look at, this versus this versus this, and look at, all of the ways that you could break down all the big stuff into smaller stuff and then tackle it on that level. And break it down as far as you can go. And so if you can only tackle the smallest of things, tackle just that. And remember that every baby step forward is a baby step forward. It's a moving forward. And then as a director, you have to make a lot of really big, important decisions, right? That's part of your job. And when you're taking steps forward, a lot of times it's going to be your decision what to do. You're at a crossroads, and it's well, which way do we go? What do we do? Do we do this or do we do that? What design mechanic do we use, or what narrative do we go with? And these are major design decisions, and so sometimes you need to just take a step back and you need to go have a good night's sleep, get some rest, and get some perspective on the idea. And don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to tell your team, look guys, I really need to sleep on this idea and think over it. It's not weak, it's not bad, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a really healthy idea. Suspending disbelief. So it's a video game, guys. In the book, the author talks about one of his colleagues who previously would carry a playing card in his pocket that said, it's a video game, just like you see on your screen here. And whenever somebody was debating too much about mechanics and whether or not they fit within the fiction of the game they were trying to create, he'd just slap down this card and say, well, it's a video game. And that's what's known as playing the video game card. It doesn't always have to fit, right? You have to balance the fun of the video game and the mechanics with the story and with the fiction. Which one is more important, right? Are you losing the fun because you're trying to be too literal with your story and you're trying to be too on script? So you really need to take that into consideration. And we talked earlier about this, but immersion is super duper important. There's a very delicate balance. Making sure that your players believe they're in the world that you're creating comes down to everything we've discussed previously. It comes down to all that ambiance and the environmental storytelling, the music, the visuals, all of that breaks it down. But don't go too far with it, right? You have to make sure that if you're having dialogue for a character in one place, dialogue stays true in another place. You have to make sure that consistency is maintained. The art for every environment has to be style matched, right? Everything has to stay consistent, and players notice, even subtly, even if they can't perceive the change, they will notice it. And it'll snap them out right away, and we have to prevent that. Is everyone making the same game? Ask yourself this question all the time. I do. Because a lot of times the answer is no. And you would not believe how often the answer to that question is no. So ask that question all the time. What game are you making? What are you working on? Check in. If it's an artist, ask them what art asset they're doing and how it fits in, where it's going to go. Make sure that they know what they're doing and how what they're doing fits in to the world and to the game as a whole. So they don't know that, they're probably pretty lost in what the game actually is. In game development, especially pretty early on, things change pretty rapidly. And so if somebody misses one meeting or isn't hearing one thing you say, they can miss a very important detail about design and just completely not understand that some major thing has changed. And they'll go on about their lives, thinking everything is the same, when in reality you guys have shifted in a totally different direction. So remember, as the director, it's your job to hold up that vision, provide the structure, and lead effectively. So you need to make sure that you're checking in with your team regularly. You're doing teachbacks, you're making sure they know, that you're doing presentations to say, look guys, this is what we've gone over, this is where we're at, this is what's happening. So just make sure you're checking in with everyone. All right, moving on to production. So the improvement loop. Um, these are the 6 steps to the improvement loop, and this is roughly what it will look like. I'm not going to talk too much about it. This is super self-explanatory. Progress over perfection. So with baby steps, this was a little bit that was mentioned, but just keep working. Just keep moving forward. As long as progress is being made, you're doing your job. As long as production never comes to a full halt, as long as you never fully stop working, you're doing good. And everything's going fine. And make sure you keep that in perspective because it's really hard to do. When things are like super duper slow, everything's going at a snail's pace, it's really hard to keep in perspective that work is still getting done. It's taking forever, but it's happening. And it doesn't have to be perfect. There's a polished phase later. There's a reason that there's a polished phase later. Put in the pieces now. Get it to work. Test it. And then fix it. And just keep moving forward. So feature creep. This is huge. I think I mentioned scope creep earlier. But it tends to be the result of an overambitious team that doesn't quite know how to develop their scope and their features. The excess of ideas during pre-production that aren't necessarily backlogged, you kind of put them all in. They're like, yeah, let's just do it all, which is all kind of an ambitious team as well. But it's great to create ideas when you're doing pre-production. Just make sure you backlog them all, or you plan to be actively working on until you have the time. And then wouldn't it be cool if? So you get into production, right? You're doing stuff, you're working on stuff, and then all of a sudden somebody comes up one day and says, hey man, wouldn't it be cool if we had like an alien with like a giant tongue in a spaceship? And maybe it's like what if it was like space werewolves? That'd be cool, right? And so like that's how feature creep happens more often than not, is scope just keeps getting inflated and inflated and inflated because it builds off of what you have. But then somebody is like, but what if we could do this? Like, this would be so cool. So stay away from that. Prevent it by working with a project manager who knows how to say backlog it. Be a ruthless editor and kill your darlings. Those go hand in hand. It's not about you. Kill it. Cut it. Let it go. It hurts sometimes. It sucks. This game might be your baby. This feature might be your baby. But if it comes to the point where you're low on time, you're low on money, you're at a point where deadline is happening, cut it. If you don't need it, get rid of it. It's your job. It's your job to cut it. Again, you can't make everyone happy, and sometimes that means you can't make you happy. Do what's best for the game. Do what's best for the team. Cut the stuff that doesn't make the cut. Finally, we get to the polish phase. So look at that list. Look at that list of nagging concerns. Go back to it. Prioritize the things that you think really need to get done. What is the game-breaking bugs? What is not right about the user experience? How can we grab them better at the beginning? What can I do to really make this better? And look at the small details, because a lot of times those small details really do make the game that much more. They add that much little extra bit of polish and shine onto your game, and you don't even realize it until you get there. It's like the post-processing. Don't go too crazy, especially when you start getting into effects. You can start going a little nutso. So be mindful of how crazy you're going, but do definitely polish and plus it up. And finally, love your work. If you love what you're doing and what you're working on, that's going to translate. It's going to translate to your players. It's going to translate to your team. It's going to translate to everyone around you. And your game is going to be good. Love what you do, right? If you're not proud of it at the end of the day, if you're not proud of the product that you're putting out there, then what are you doing? Make a product that at the end of the day, you're going to put on your portfolio and proudly stand up and say, I did this. My team accomplished this. And keep that in mind whenever you're working on your project and whenever you're working on your games. Be proud of your work. Love your work. fall in love with it. Absolutely fall in love with your work. Deep dive into it and figure out how to just love it. Development's a ride. It's a trip. It can be up and down. It's as much of an emotional journey as the journey that you create for your players. And so understand that going in. Understand that it's not easy and that it will be hard. But fall in love with it and go on the journey and embrace it and love every second of it, because it'll be worth it. Thank you.